When it comes to producing Yu-Gi-Oh cards, there's a lot to consider when balancing the game. This is to say, when Konami first started publishing cards, they couldn't simply print everything from the original manga due to power creep and hype reasoning. If Dark Magician, Blue Eyes White Dragon, and Red Eyes Black Dragon release in the same primordial set, then what chase cards do you have for later releases? With that in mind, you have two options for card designing. One being to create new, wholly original cards that fit the current meta climate. Second option is to take a pre-existing card, rework the art and color, slap on a new name, and call it a day. Thus, the Counterpart cards were born. Us TCG folk may be familiar with this concept, as many imports in the West were translated to a numbered series. Think of Winged Dragon, Guardian of the Fortress, number 1 and number 2. Two cards that are very much different in the OCG. Overseas, it's the Dragon type, Fortress protecting Winged Dragon. In the Winged Beast type, Wyvern. The card Watkid was originally named Oslo Hero number 2, which is in reference to Oslo Hero, of whom doesn't include a number 1 in its name. I'm unsure why they reverted the name on this one obscure card. Sometimes the naming conventions go even further beyond, like with Steel Ogre Grotto number 1 and Rock Ogre Grotto number 1, despite both having number 2 versions that are different cards entirely, and Rock number 2 having a counterpart in Stone Ogre Grotto, with their names translating to Giant Idol of Steel, Cavern Jin Ogre Rock, War Earth, Iron Fist Golem, and Stone Giant. Crawling Dragon number 2 is a counterpart to Black Dragon Jungle King, despite its name being a numbered version of Crawling Dragon, which has her own zombie counterpart in Dragon Zombie. It's a shame because the name Corpse Devouring Dragon sounds badass, though regardless of the name, number 2 is not a dragon type. What even? You know, if they were so keen on renaming these cards with numbers in mind, why didn't they start with number 1 or have a plan on releasing the rest, because plenty are lost in translation? Speaking of zombies, zombie counterparts would be a familiar variation too. Zanky and Armored Zombie, and Crass Clown and Clown Zombie. These were made specifically to be zombified versions and not just aesthetically different cards. This concept would continue through Yu-Gi-Oh's history, like with Glow Up Bulb and Glow Up Bloom, Scapegoat and Scapegoat, and Robin Goblin and Robin Zombie. If you ask me, this is one of the better, more justified uses of reused card artwork. Sometimes the counterpart cards look identical but have no common naming convention. Karibo and Wretched Ghost of the Attic, Petite Angel and Shining Friendship, and Two-Mouth Dark Ruler and Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon as a few examples. This would be the most common functionality of these cards, to be designed as different cards to add upon set size and make work a bit easier as Konami employees create new cards and push the ever-growing product in its starting years. Some of them you may not have noticed, since a lot of the time the art's perspective is changed, making distinguishing counterparts tougher than others. Think of Witch of the Black Forest and Goddess with the Third Eye, and Silverfang and Wolf. More often, the color palette is completely changed, which adds another layer of separation from the original. Fusionist and Little Chimera, Man-Eating Black Shark and Great White, and Enchanting Mermaid and Amazon of the Seas. Other ones are barely changed, making the technique very noticeable. Gyakutenu Megami and Empress Judge, Change Slime and Gruesome Goo, and Armored Starfish and Hito Denchak. Come on guys, try a little! And the Janjo Zone is a one-man band, so become a Janjo counterpart by joining my Patreon for as little as $2 a month, since I don't make much on YouTube, and your help ensures the longevity of the channel, more so than if this video got 1,000 views. Your help goes a long way. Other times, counterparts do have synergy with one another. Let's look at Lava Battle Guard and Swamp Battle Guard, two cards that gain attack when they're both on the field. Beautiful Headhuntress is fusion material for a stronger version in Warrior of Tradition. Princess of Tsurugi's counterpart, Queen's Double, is played up as a protector of sorts. The ritual spell Commencement Dance is used to turn the dancer into the Dancing Soldier, Performance of Sword. While not having synergy, Mystical Elf and Dark Elf would be a precursor to the Dark Counterpart series of monsters. This opens a whole floodgate to cards like Dark Arm Dragon, the Dark Creator, and Rainbow Dark Dragon. Dark Doriado would have a whole chain of counterparts, Shadow Priestess of Ohm to Elemental Mistress Doriado to Lady of Faith to just plainly Doriado. Later on, we would see various thematic counterparts like Light Ray, Chaos, and Memento. Is that Wretched Ghost of the Attic? Man, that's full circle. One thematic group of cards are toons. These were mostly taken straight from the manga, but would later be expanded upon in their own archetype. There are a chunk of cards that were reused in ways of storyline, but are technically reused assets nonetheless. Some that come to mind include Darkblade and Warrior Digrepher as probably the two most used characters in Yu-Gi-Oh lore. Warrior of Zera has a similar story to Digrepher that leads to a multitude of card artworks, but that's a whole other can of worms. The last talking point is the ramifications of counterparts. Sometimes, the name translations Upper Deck gave us created more confusion than not. Machine Attacker's copy is Machine Soldier of the Demon World, which would get renamed as Cyber Soldier of Dark World, but it had to be stated later on that it is not a cyber card. Thank God the Dark World archetype is 2 words, because otherwise Cyber Soldier might have another asterisk. Same deal with Cyberstein, as its OCG name is Devil Franken. A majority of the archetype exclusion condition would be for non-counterpart cards, but I felt like it was something to note, that naming cards a certain way depending on how they looked could affect their playstyle. After all, could you imagine using Cyber Support with Cyber Source just because of an early name translation that Konami did not name themselves? It's almost a lost art that we don't get more silly, dumb, useless recolors like a red Cyberstein, but I digress. I get it. What do you do with these cards that have the same appearance as others? Slap on a number 2 or try to make some sense out of it. I could go on forever about counterpart cards and all the variations of uses. It appears that as time goes on, Konami leans into the idea in more creative ways than to use them as filler material. At the very least, we're getting proper name translations as opposed to the days of old where Upper Deck just named counterparts as whatever they felt like. Because I'm sure they would have named Cosmo Brain Cosmo Queen number 2. Then again, there is a charm to those old palette swaps in ways of looking at a card from a different design perspective. What colors, angles, and lore fit the card better? When you look at these cards back to back, which ones do you prefer? The original or the redesign? What's your favorite one of the bunch? I better get out of here before there's a Janjo counterpart. Oh no!